It started with a crunch. At first I thought I'd driven over some rogue art installation, but no, it was the shattered remains of ceramic garden gnomes mixed into a fresh bed of flowers, and smack in the middle of it all, a giant laminated sign zip-tied to a chain across my driveway. Access temporarily, denied pending community aesthetic review. I blinked. Once, twice. Maybe I had parked in the wrong cul-de-sac. But no, there was my porch, my dog Moose, barking behind the window, my mail sticking out of a mailbox that had suddenly sprouted ornamental hedges around it overnight. And then she appeared, Charlene, president of the Meadowstone Estates Homeowners Association, clipboard clutched in one hand, oversized sunglasses perched on her face, even though the sun had already dipped. She strutted toward me like a lawyer, about to deliver a closing argument, then jabbed her pen at the sign. "Sorry, Luke," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "But it's not your driveway anymore. It's our community's aesthetic at stake." And just like that, she twirled on her heel and walked away, like she had just won the final round of HOA Idol. I stood there speechless, ankle-deep in begonias I hadn't ordered, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to outmaneuver her. The next morning, I tried to play it reasonable. I called the HOA office, got transferred 5 times, and finally hung up when the last extension sent me to a voicemail box that was full. I emailed, got back a polite auto-response that basically said, "Pound sand. All complaints must go through the Visual Harmony Board." So like any sane adult, I showed up to the next board meeting. I figured, surely someone will see reason. Instead, I was ambushed with a PowerPoint slideshow photos of my home, snapped from angles so weird I could see into my living room. They circled my driveway in red ink, criticizing the non-compliant curve and non-traditional stone palette. I tried to speak, but Charlene, gripping a tiny ornamental gavel she definitely bought on Etsy, banged it on the table and said, "Your time is up." When I got home, there was a new warning taped to my mailbox about Moose's excessive barking at sunset, threatening $100 fine per incident. It was never about aesthetics. It was about control. See, Charlene didn't just run the HOA, she was the HOA. She had dreams of turning Meadowstone into some Stepford Wives version of suburban utopia where every house looked identical, and she reigned supreme. I'd first crossed her a year ago when I helped my neighbor get approval for a sustainable garden that didn't match the HOA's preferable foliage guide. From that moment on, I was on Charlene's list, but blocking my only driveway, that crossed a line. I started digging not just emotionally, but legally. Turns out, while the HOA owned most of the internal streets, the main access road into Meadowstone, it wasn't HOA property, it was a leased easement from a private trust, a trust whose contract had expired 9 months ago, meaning that main road was up for grabs. That's when I called in an old friend, Zach. Zach once bought an entire strip mall just to evict a nail salon that overcharged him for a bad pedicure. When I explained the situation, Zach's exact words were, "Dude, say less." Within a week, we quietly bought out the easement rights. All of it, meaning the only road into Meadowstone Estates now legally belonged to me. It was time for Charlene to learn the true meaning of access denied. At dawn, 2 weeks later, trucks rolled up to the entrance. Concrete mixers, iron beams, wiring crews. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, murmuring about road maintenance and emergency repairs. At noon, we unveiled the masterpiece. A gleaming double-swing, keypad-secured entry gate, facial recognition license plate, scanners. The whole 9 yards. Right beside it, a polished steel sign. Private access, Meadowstone entry systems, permit required violators, will be towed monthly access fee. $150. Resident discount available. And there, screeching up in a baby pink Mercedes, was Charlene. She jumped out, waving a copy of the HOA handbook like it was the Constitution. "You can't do this," she shrieked. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. "Actually," I said, pointing to the sign, "I can. It's my property now." She spluttered, "You're holding the community hostage." "No," I replied, still smiling. "I'm managing access. Feel free to apply for a permit, just like everyone else." And oh, did people apply? Within 24 hours, over 80 applications flooded the portal. Some angry, some apologetic one, simply titled, "Please tell me this is real." The best part, Charlene had to apply too. Through a friend, of course, because God forbid she admit defeat. The fallout came fast. At the emergency HOA meeting that week, the crowd turned on her Mr. Hastings, who used to patrol the sidewalks, measuring grass height, was now red-faced with fury. "You told us you secured that easement, Charlene." Charlene babbled about prioritizing landscaping improvements over contract renewals. Translation, she blew it. The board voted to suspend all enforcement activities pending an audit. By the end of the month, Charlene had been formally censured and stripped of her title. Several of her inner circle cronies resigned, realizing they were no longer on the winning team. But Charlene wasn't done. No. She filed a formal complaint with the zoning board, accusing me of operating an unauthorized commercial toll facility. When the inspector came, he looked around, whistled, and said, "Man, I wish my HOA was this organized." 3 days later, I received an official letter. No violations found. Installation improves emergency response and community security. I printed a copy, hand-delivered it to Charlene's front porch with a little bow on top. And that, my friends, was the beginning of the end. It didn't stop there, though. When the city dug into the HOA's history, they found Charlene had approved thousands of dollars worth of landscaping projects without permits or receipts. Most of the money had gone straight to a company owned by her cousin. The community erupted. A town hall meeting had to be moved to the local high school gym to fit the crowd. There were pitchforks, but in the form of very strongly worded statements. The board voted overwhelmingly to remove Charlene permanently. They invited me to take over as HOA president. I declined. All I wanted was peace. Instead, I offered the community my gate management system for free. No more fees, no more drama, just RFID tags for seamless entry, emergency access integration, and a new rulebook based on transparency and trust. A few weeks later, a new sign went up at the entrance, "Welcome to Meadowstone Estates," where everyone has a key. No fine print, no hidden rules. Just a quiet promise that this was our neighborhood again. And Charlene, she still lives here, keeps her head down. Sometimes I catch her glancing at the gate from her porch, the glint of regret in her eyes almost endearing. Almost. Sometimes the biggest victories aren't the loud ones. They're the quiet afternoons where kids play hopscotch in the driveways, parents chat without fear of fines, and you sip your coffee in peace, knowing you fought the good fight and won. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a run-in with a power-hungry HOA or fought back against a ridiculous rule? Drop your stories and thoughts in the comments below. I can't wait to hear them. And hey, if you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget to subscribe, and join our growing community of rule benders and freedom fighters. Until next time, stay resilient, and remember, when they block your driveway, sometimes you just gotta buy the road.